Hey guys, welcome back. Alright, this video will be on animation. So, what is animation? Simply, we can look at it as a change over time. So, when we're talking about layers in After Effects, it is the change of a layer's properties over a set amount of time. Alright? Simply put, think of change over time. So the next thing we want to talk about is how to approach creating an animation. There are two steps that we'll look at, and it's just planning and executing. For the planning, you want to ask yourself, what are you trying to achieve? What animation are you trying to create? For example, it might be, I need to make a text that will slide in from the left of the screen, and I need it to last 2 seconds. All right? Next, you can ask yourself, what will I need to create it? So for this example, I will need a text layer. I will need to make use of the position property, and I will need to have at least 2 keyframes to set the starting position and the ending position. And these 2 keyframes need to last for a 2-second time frame. All right, so now you kind of have the planning, you know what you're trying to do, you know what the animation is supposed to look like, at least in your head. Next is execute. So you can go ahead, create the layers, add the effects, animate the layers through effects or property values or whatever it is that you need to do in order to create the animation. Now let's look at layer properties. All right, so there's 4 main ones that we mainly work with. First, position. All right, this property determines the exact location of a layer. You can think of it as your exact location when you're using Google Maps, right? So for example, you may be at one position, which is Hua Hin School, at 4 p.m. That is the time that you're at the position of Hua Hin School. Then later, let's say 5 p.m., you're at a different position, which is Market Village. So in this 1 hour time span, from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock, your position has moved from Hua Hin School to Market Village. That's one way you can think of position, and moving from one location or one position to another position through the span of time. And this has to do with change over time, right? Next, we have scale. This property determines the size of a layer. You use this to make a layer bigger or smaller. Next, we have rotation. This property determines the angle the layer is on. Is it slanted? Is it straight? Is it vertical? What kind of rotation do we have here? What kind of angle are we working with? And last, opacity. This property determines the visibility of the layer. 100% opacity means the layer is in full view. All colors are seen, the whole image is completely visible. 0% opacity will make the layer completely invisible, right? And in between is how you can make it opaque or transparent. So using these properties, we can animate our layers in an infinite amount of ways. We can make our layers move anywhere around the screen. We can make it gain visibility. We can make it lose visibility. We can make it rotate or shrink or get bigger. Any combination of properties that we'd like. The most important thing to remember is that animation is a layers' change over time. All right? All right, so next we're gonna try and focus a little bit on reading the time on the timeline, mainly because it's very important to understand how to take advantage of knowing the current time of the video when you're making your animation. For example, before we were talking about making a text animation that is 2 seconds long. That means you will need to know how exactly to make an animation that is 2 seconds compared to 2 minutes or 2 hours, right? Or 2 frames. So looking here, these are set in frames. You can tell by the F. And depending on the time of your composition, you'll sometimes be able to see it in minutes or in frames. Right now we only have it in frames. But we have this over here, which tells you the current time that you're looking at. So this 52 means that we're looking at the 50-second moment in this video, right? And if we move up here, this is 1 minute and 11 seconds into the video. And over here, 2 minutes, 18 seconds. So we can use this information if we need to know at which point our animation starts and which point it will end. For example, if I need an animation to start at this 20-second mark, I can just make sure it starts at the 20-second mark, right? For example, this Oakland. Let's say I want to start at the 20-second mark. We can see that there's these keyframes here, and I can actually just move it over, and now it'll actually just happen at 20 seconds, right? Rather than wherever it was before. So before, it was, I guess back here, which was at the 17-second mark, right? And using this down here, you can zoom in to the time. So the more we zoom in, the more of the time we'll see. So now this is slower, right? So now, for example, these two keyframes, we can actually see how many seconds these two keyframes are. So here we have this keyframe at 13 seconds. If I want to move forward 1 frame, I can press Control and forward arrow. So I'll press that, and now we're at the next frame, next frame. So you see this number moving forward because I'm moving up 1 frame, right? This right here. And if I go up past 30, you'll see it reset to 0. So 29, and next second, right? Because it's 30 frames per second. And here we'll see that this animation pretty much ends 14 seconds and 8 frames. So that's roughly a 1 second animation, right? And the other quick way to skip forward 10 frames, Control, Shift, Arrow, 10 frames. So now we're, you can see that 10 frames, and then 28, and 4. So using that 30 frames, we can exactly make a 1 second animation. We'll get into that more later. The important part to get here is getting used to time in the timeline. All right, so again, we have the playhead and we have the time markers here. And this will definitely help you when you need to know what the current time is in the video, especially if you need specific timing for specific events in your video. All right, next we'll talk about the work area. All right, so this bar over here determines your work area. So it's the entire video or composition area where your work is created in, right? So let's say I edit this, and this is actually like 5 minutes, okay? So now this is gonna be very long, right? So you'll see this is right here. So now I'll zoom in all the way. So now here for 5 minutes, or half of this composition now, there's nothing going on. It's empty, right? So there's a lot of wasted space in this composition right now. So we can shrink our work area, which is, you know, this bar right here. this main bar. We can shrink that down. So it'll only be, let's say, up to here, okay? To shrink this, the end of this, to wherever our playhead is. So at this time, I can end this work area by pressing the key N. So now you see it moves all the way here. And this will end the work area, all right? And usually after you do this, you want to trim the entire area to focus only on whatever's on this bar, because we don't need this anymore. So to trim it, you can right click and then trim comp to work area. So now we only have this area to work with. Now, keyframes. What are they? Keyframes define a specific change of a property or effect at a specific time. For example, I want to create an animation on this keyframe that will move from here, the right side of the screen, and moves to the center, all right? And I want this animation to last 2 seconds, all right? And let's say I want this to happen after 5 seconds have passed. How can I ensure that I can do that? Well, first, let's take a look at our timeline. Here, we can see that this is a pretty long video, right? We see the seconds and 5 and 30, which means this is a roughly 6-minute composition. We definitely do not need 6 minutes. So I'm going to shorten it. Let's go down and switch this to a 0 because we don't need that minute. All right. Let's make this 10 seconds. Okay. Now we have a 10-second composition, and that's good because I only want a composition, or sorry, I only want a animation that lasts 2 seconds. And before I mentioned that I want this to happen after 5 seconds. All right. So one way I can specifically define that is to go here and I can click on this and define 5. Press enter, and I'm exactly at the 5 second mark. And like I mentioned, I want this to start off over here. So I'll move it over here, and I want it to move. Now the property that I can use to change location is position, right? So I can go to keyframe, which is this layer, and I can either press P, which is the shortcut for position, or I can open this up, go to transform, and here we have the properties. So position is the specific one that I'm working with. Now, animations are based on keyframes, okay? And pressing the stopwatch will help me create the first keyframe, okay? So here I go, and I have this keyframe here now. I'll move this over so you can see. We have this nice keyframe over here. One way we can think about the stopwatch is we can think of it as a watcher. And this watcher watches out for changes that we make on the property that we turned it on for. So, for example, I turn the stopwatch on the position property. So now this watch will watch for any changes in position in my composition. So right now, all it knows is at any point before this and even afterwards, the position must be here, or this exact position setup. So 1621 on the x-axis and 388 on the y-axis, right here. So before I mentioned, I want this to be a 2-second animation. And I'm going to change my mind because 2 seconds is actually pretty long. So I'm going to make this a 1-second animation. 1 second is 30 frames, right? Or if I don't want to work with frames and I just want to determine the time here, I can just go here and press 6, because that would be 6 seconds. And that'll take me directly right here. And let's say I want this to be a 1 second animation, where in the 1 second, my layer will start from here, and a second later be here. So I already have the first moment set here, which will be equivalent to this. And now over here at the 6 second mark, I want this to be in the center. So I press this because it'll move the position over there. So now see this line. This means that between this time, this is the movement that it will have. Between 5 seconds, 6 seconds, this will happen. All right, so remember, the keyframes define a change over time. All right, that is animation, and keyframes help define that. And the keyframe defines a change in a property at a specific time. So here we have this to start, which is fine, but it's now saying that between this and this, there will be a change in the value, right? So at this point, we are at this position right here. And we said a second later be here. And that's exactly what it does for us right here. Here we define at the 6 second mark, be at position 798 and 388. Now we can see that this animation lasts 1 second, right? Now what if I did want to make it 2 seconds? What else can I do? Well, I can move it, I can move the playhead to the 2 second mark, right? Like let's say right here, right? That would be 7 seconds. But I'll just do it more precisely. So let's say here I go, 10 frames, 20 frames, 30 frames, which is a second, 10 frames, 20 frames, 30 frames, which is 2 second mark, right? So now I can actually just move this keyframe over here, because really we only need 2 keyframes to move it from one position to the next, right? So I can just make this. So now this will be a 2 second animation, right? So now this will do this, all right? So let's see how this looks now. So if I play it, okay, not bad. Yeah, it's a little slow, but it's okay. So rocky, but it's okay. All right, so that's how it moves in. Now let's see that compared to previously, where I had it as a 1 second animation. All right, nice. So what's one thing we can learn from just seeing this? Well, you can think about it like this. These keyframes being closer, does it make my animation faster or slower? If I move this all the way out here, will my animation be faster or slower? What do you think? Well, remember that this has to do with time, right? So this is 5 seconds. And now I move this pretty much all the way to 8 seconds. That means this animation will take 3 seconds, which means that this animation is going to occur very slow, right? Compared to if this keyframe was at the 1 second mark, you know, this will be a lot faster than 3 seconds, right? So that's another way for you to be able to time your animations. When you know and how to read the time on the timeline or create their time here, you'll be able to control how fast or slow your animation is, which is very important in creating your videos. So that will cover it for keyframes and animation. I hope that helped. If you guys need any assistance, please let me know. All right, have a good one.